This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
Also, the world resembles the ball of his eye. The ocean that encircles the earth is like unto the white of the eye. The dry land is the iris, Jerusalem the pupil, and the temple the image mirrored in the pupil of the eye. The Legends of the Jews. Book 1. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. And I thank all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. I do have some very interesting things to share with you this evening with regard to the subject matter. And also, I want to remind, especially those of you that are near or around the Georgia area here in the Southeast, that on August 5th and 6th, 2017, I will be joining Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, Stephen Ben-Nun, Yana Ben-Nun, Laurel Austin, and my friends Carol Austin and also Kathy will be joining us. For the evening, we will be having a conference where Stephen and I discuss and debate the topic of the globe versus the flat earth. And so many of you have been asking as far as where, you could gather together with us and fellowship to share, break meal, and come together in a really intimate setting. And this would be the perfect opportunity. And so if you can, go to globalversusflatearth.com, and there you will see where you can purchase the tickets. They're only $25 for the 2-day conference, which will begin at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, August 5th, go till 5 p.m. that evening. The highlight of the day will be the after lunch debate between Dr. Pidgeon and I on these subjects. Of course, I will be representing the geocentric flat earth cosmology as presented by the scriptures, and Dr. Pidgeon will be covering the heliocentric side of that, and he will be tying it also together with the scriptures, which is interesting. So we'll see how all that plays out. But if you can, please do. You can also get discounted rooms that have been held for the 150 people. I believe it will be between 125 and 150. And that's all the space that we have for this conference. And it was planned within 2 months. And so it was put together in kind of a quick fashion. And it will be something that, especially for those of you that will not be able to attend the International Flat Earth Conference, which will be from November 9th and 10th, 2017 in Raleigh, North Carolina, that this would give you something to attend and check out on the lead up to that conference. And I also want to make mention that Chris and Liz Bailey in Ohio, they are putting on a conference, Take Over the World Conference, I believe it is, and Rob will be speaking there on the flat earth and geocentric cosmology as well. And so a lot going on within these 3 months, and especially with the whole thing of the sign of Revelation 12 and how that is tied to the Feast of Trumpets this year in September 23rd of 2017. And then we have that the solar eclipse in August sometime. I forget exactly when. Kathy, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with the chat room. But Stephen, Dr. Pigeon and I did a show last night on Revolution Radio, and I will be uploading that sometime tomorrow for those of you that missed it. It was a very fascinating show, and we talked about this particular solar eclipse and how it begins, according to him, when the sun rises, and that it will be, the shadow will be allocated between California and South Carolina, I believe is what he said. And this is something that hasn't happened in this manner for a very long time. And so all of us here in America, we have a chance to bear witness to this, which, eclipses are absolutely fascinating, unfolding phenomena in and of themselves. So I do plan on getting together with people, if possible, to share this particular experience. And so a lot going on within these upcoming next few months, August through September. And because of the virgin clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, child within her womb, and a crown of 12 stars, being Mercury, Venus, and Mars in alignment with the 9-star constellation of Leo, that particular sign unfolds on the Feast of Trumpets this year, and it also being encoded into the scriptures for thousands of years. In my opinion, it's got to be in some manner significant. And, I know a lot of people, there's different individuals out there that are doing work where they are connecting it to the rapture of the church, but I know that can't happen until the Antichrist is revealed and the beast system comes into power. And so in my mind, that can't be the unfolding of that event unless a lot of things happen between now and then. And I'm not saying that they can't, because of course the scriptures say that there will be peace and then come sudden destruction, and that the dominoes will start to fall in rapid succession. And so anything can happen. But as the scriptures prophesy, the Antichrist, the Apollyon Abaddon, given the key to the bottomless pit, that all of that occurs prior to the second advent. And I do believe, however, that Christ, whenever he comes, that it will be in conjunction with the Feast of Trumpets, and that the seventh trump being blown and the declaration by the angels that the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord, that all of that will play out as he fulfills the fall feasts. And so it remains to be seen whether this whole is associated and possibly announcing the coming of Antichrist, or if a whole lot of things fall in line and come into play prior to us reaching September. But, we will go and see. But anyways, I just want to thank all of you and give a shout out to all those in the chat room. I appreciate you joining us this evening. And definitely, it is Monday, August 21st. Kathy has posted a link to that particular event. And interestingly enough, that is 2 days after my birthday, which is also intriguing. So, a lot going on. All right, this evening, I wanted to speak about some of the things that I'm working on with regard to the third book of this Flat Earth and Firmament trilogy. Those that don't know what I'm talking about, in June of 2015, the Most High gave me revelation that allowed me to basically decrypt the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, as written in the book of Enoch, and that there are 12 chapters attributed to the motions of the sun, the moon, the stars, the wandering planets, and also the other heavenly luminaries. And in coming to discernment and accepting as revelation that the earth is a flat circular plane that was inscribed upon the waters of the deep and then encapsulated over by the solid structure of the dome, and that together they form in shape what is described in Isaiah 40 verse 22 as a tent or a tabernacle, and that our enclosed world system, as I have now been pertaining to it, that this is what is described as being established in the first 4 days of creation. And so I'm going to talk about a few of those things, and then I'm going to tie it together with my recent examination of the book of Odysseus, well, the legend of Odysseus written by Homer, and also that of Jason and the Argonauts, and Virgil's Aeneas, the tales and legends of Aeneas, the hero Aeneas. And so, but before I get to that, because it's going to be very interesting with regard to the whole topic of paradise, the sides of the north and the mount of the congregation, and how that particular verse in Isaiah chapter 14, that is the key for unlocking the entirety of the cosmology with regard to where the vortex, Jacob's ladder, and also the throne room and the heavenly temple and the place of the righteous, and as well as the place of the wicked, are all together located in singularity, in vertical singularity. And that is what I'm describing and elaborating upon within the various chapters of this book. And just so you know as to where I am writing the final chapter right now. Working on that today, and tomorrow I should be finished with that. And then it's just a matter of proofreading all of the various chapters and preparing the manuscript for publication. And I'm giving myself 2 months to do this. And so it should not be long at all now. But there's so much new information, really incredible information, that I'm so looking forward to sharing with you as listening audience, because there are certain things which I have been holding back in anticipation of the publication of this book, and that I won't speak about certain aspects of this until I release it into print. And so when I do that, there's some things that I'm going to be talking about and sharing that are just absolutely mind-blowing. And I have shared a few of those things with some of my closest associates, and they agree with me that it is absolutely mind-blowing. And so, I guess I could kind of tell you the names. Well, I'll do that when we return. Or at some point this evening, I will tell you the names of the chapters so you can get a better idea as to the fullness of what I'm bringing forth in this particular title. But the reason that I began with the whole quotation on how the enclosed world system resembles that of the ball of an eye, in this case, Adam's eye, is to set the premise for leading into the story of how I'm going to tie in together the whole legend of Odysseus and Jason and Aeneas with this cosmology as I have been presenting it. But I'm going to first establish and elaborate a little bit on the shape of the earth as described within Scripture. And so let me read this verse again and then expound upon it just a little bit. It says, "Also the world resembles the ball of his eye. The ocean that encircles the earth is like unto the white of the eye. The dry land is the iris. Jerusalem the pupil, and the temple the image mirrored in the pupil of the eye." And so you think about the plane of the earth with the Antarctic ice wall as being the outer limit, if indeed that is what it is, because there is postulation that there is further land and continents even beyond that, which we are not allowed to know about, explore, or examine an investigation in any manner. But there are sources for that, and I share that within the book as well. And so it's quite possible that the ends of the earth and that the firmament where it comes down in merger with the outer edge of the great circle that is the plane of the earth as described in Isaiah 40:22, that this could be, the outer perimeter could even be greater than in extent than what we see as represented by the Antarctic ice wall. But for now, we're just going to postulate that somewhere right beyond the Antarctic ice wall, that is where the boundaries, the outer limits for the firmament in joining in union with the earth, that is where it comes together. So just to, so you can visualize and follow along in conceptualization with what I'm going to be laying out here. All right, and so I'm going to read a couple other passages which also set the premise for this same kind of ideology. It says this in 1 Clement 20, verse 5 and 6. "The basin of the boundless sea, gathered together by his workmanship into its reservoirs, passeth not the barriers wherewith it is surrounded. But even as he ordered it, so it doeth. For he said, So far shalt thou come, and thy waves shall be broken within thee. The ocean, which is impassable for men, and the worlds beyond it, are directed by the same ordinances of the master." And so here again, as in the previous passage, the oceans are described as surrounding the dry land, the continental land masses, which are interdispersed in circling the polar north. and that the water to the outer edge, the Antarctic perimeter, if you will, that those oceans surround these land masses, and that they are contained and form what is here regarded as the basin of the boundless sea. Now, that word basin is very interesting. When you look up the word basin, you get the idea of a bathtub. It says this: an open, usually circular vessel with sloping or carving sides, used typically for holding water for washing a new washstand and basin. Chiefly British, a bowl used especially in cooking. Second definition: a dock built in a harbor or a river that is noticeably affected by the tide. An enclosed or partly enclosed watershed area. Third definition: geography: a large or a small depression in the surface of the land or in the ocean floor. The entire tract of country drained by a river and its tributaries. A great depression in the surface of the lithosphere occupied by an ocean. Fourth definition: geology: a broad area of the earth beneath which the strata dip usually from the sides toward the center. And so basically like a sink or a bathtub, right? Okay, so consider that while I read these few passages here, which also speak about the outer boundary, the perimeter, and how the oceans are contained. And remember, they form a level, and that beyond this level, all the land which rises up past sea level, that all of that is what makes up the inhabitable part of the earth, or the dry land, where all the ground creatures and, as far as humanity, that is where we live. All right, it says this from Job 38, verse 8 through 11. Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness the swaddling for it, and break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, hitherto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed. And so the Most High here in this passage is describing to Job the establishment of this outer perimeter, this boundary, this basin that contains the boundless sea. All right, a couple more passages linked to this. Who laid the foundations of the earth, that it should not be removed forever? Thou coverest it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At thy rebuke they fled. At the voice of thy thunder they hasted away. They go up by the mountains, they go down by the valleys, unto the place which thou hast founded for them. Thou hast set a bound that they may not pass over, that they turn not again to cover the earth. And of course, this is referencing even the flood that was brought upon the earth, and also how, in my opinion, that in the first world age, where the earth became without form and void, in 2 Peter chapter 3, it describes how even that earth age was destroyed by a massive, whether it was worldwide deluge or not, it was destroyed by waves and ocean and water. And that even places like Pumapunku, show that a cataclysmic, a massive cataclysmic event had occurred in our ancient past, and that judgment was brought upon the fallen angels, the rebel angels, and their culture and civilization in our ancient past. And in my opinion, all that is tied to even the destruction of Atlantis, where it was destroyed and submerged beneath the waves and lost forever, as described in Ezekiel chapter 26. And so when we come back from break, we'll pick up. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to continue establishing as far as the shape of the earth with vaulted dome. And the next passage that I want to bring forth is from the book of the Secrets of Enoch. Because in this passage and chapter, the Most High tells Enoch as to how he established the firmament to the circle of the earth, which in Job and also in Proverbs is described as being inscribed upon the waters of the deep. Let me see actually if I have that where I could. Yeah. Well, we'll get to that at another point, but I'm going to go ahead and share this first. All right. It says this. And then I made firm the heavenly circle. Now notice that firm as part of the word firmament, that it is attributing that the firmament, the expanse which encapsulates and covers over the circle of the earth, that this is a solid structure. And so here the Most High says, and then I made firm the heavenly circle. The heavenly circle is the vaulted dome. And made that the lower water, which is under heaven, collect itself together into one whole, and that the chaos become dry. And it became so. Out of the waves I created rock, hard and big, and from the rock I piled up the dry. And the dry I called earth. And the midst of the earth I called the abyss, that is to say, the bottomless. Now this is very important because this is also associated to the vortex that I'm going to be speaking about, which is centered upon the middle of the earthen plane, and that there is both a vortex which leads up into the upper heavens and to the throne room of the Most High God, as is indicative by the star Polaris, which is unmoving, fixed, and situated just as the earth is. That star points to the throne room of the Most High God and the heavenly temple, which is established directly above it. But that there is also there upon the earth a wide gaping maw, which is a hole, like a huge hole, whirlpool, a vortex which sucks the waters of the ocean down, it funnels them down into the interior of what in this passage is referenced as the abyss or the bottomless. That there is a hole which leads into the interior of the earth, and that falls a way into and begins as the opening to Sheol begins there, the 7 levels of the various designations of Sheol, Gehenna, Tartarus, many other different names for the 7 levels of hell. And just as there are 7 levels of heaven, there are 7 levels to the plane of the earth, which meets in the middle and joins together and overlaps the spiritual dimensions with that of the physical and also that of the demonic. And so the earth is the meeting place, the place of merger for both the heavens and hell, which is why here in the duality, we learn through the experience of pain and pleasure, and also good and evil, light and darkness, that it is here in this dimensionality that we learn the spiritual and also the carnal. All right, so continuing. I collected the sea in one place and bound it together with a yoke. Now remember that yoke, like you put a yoke upon the neck of an oxen, that it prevents it from straying. And using that yoke, you guide it and you prevent it from straying. And so the Most High is basically saying that, just as in the other passages, he established a boundary, an outer perimeter, a limit to where the sea can go, and that it is contained within this basin, within the structure of this, as we see in the Gleason map, the outer edges are the Antarctic ice wall, which in every direction is the southern limit. And that it forms a giant circle, almost as like Auguste Piccard, in describing it, he said that the earth looked like a flat disc with upturned edge. Those upturned edges, that is the boundary, the establishment of the outer perimeter. It is the yoke which prevents the sea from going beyond. And so continuing. And I said to the sea, behold, I give you your eternal limits, and you shall not break loose from your component parts. Thus I made fast the firmament. This day I called me the first created. The book of the secrets of Enoch. And so here, the Most High is also talking about how he joined to this outer perimeter, to this yoke, which on the United Nations flag, it is represented by the laurel wreath. That is the ice wall, the outer edge. Because you don't see on that map, which shows the true orientation of the earth as the continents circle around the northern polar region, you don't see anywhere depicted upon it Antarctica, the so-called southern polar continent. That it is not a continent, but it is the outer limits of what we are talking about with regard to the circle of the earth. And so here he says, and I said to the sea, behold, I give you your eternal limits, and you shall not break loose from your component parts. And thus I made fast the firmament. And so he's describing, again, as I said, joining in union the firmament, which at the very beginning of this passage, he describes as I made firm the heavenly circle, that this is the creation that is being described within this particular verse. I'm going to share one more from the Wisdom of Jesus Son of Sirach, chapter 16, verse 26 and 27. It says, when the Lord created his works from the beginning, and in making them determined their boundaries, he arranged his works in an eternal order and their dominion for all generations. And so I'm going to share one more passage. I got to find it. I don't have it here located, but after I do so, we will then go into some of the other aspects of what I would like to cover with regard to this. Okay, let me pull this up here. It's going to take me just a couple of minutes. If anybody has any questions with regard to what I'm talking about, or if I'm not making myself clear, please let me know in the chat room, and I will do what I can to elaborate further. All right. I do believe it is. No, it's in portion 2. And the reason I'm taking time to actually find this is because it is deeply profound with regard to showing you, and I do believe I found it, showing you again the shape of the cosmology and how the firmament is said to have been joined together with the outer perimeter, that the waves are stayed and held back their eternal limits. So I'm going to read this. It's from the Chronicles of Jeremiah, chapter 2, describing the creation of the third day. It says, on the third day, the earth was like a plain. Isn't that interesting? Like a plain. And the waters covered the face of the whole earth. When the word of God went forth, that is Yeshua, when the word of God went forth, saying, let the waters be gathered together, the mountains were lifted up and scattered over the earth, and deep valleys were dug down into the bowels of the earth, into which the waters rolled and were gathered, as it is said, the gathering of the waters he called the seas. The waters then immediately rose tumultuously to a great height and covered the face of the earth as at first, until God rebuked them and subdued them and placed them under the hollow of his feet, and measured them in his palm, so that they could neither diminish nor increase. He surrounded the sea with sand as a fence, just as a man makes a fence for his vineyard, so that when the waters approach and see the fence before them, they recede. As it is said, will they not fear my signs, says the Lord? Before the waters were finally gathered together, the rivers and the fountains of the deep were created, for the earth was stretched over the waters, just as a ship floating in the midst of the sea, as it is said, to spread out the earth over the waters. And God opened a gate in the Garden of Eden and brought forth all kinds of plants and every kind of tree. yielding fruit after its kind and every kind of grass. I need to actually skip down just a little bit more. Okay, I think this is where I need to be. All the fountains of the waters rise from the depths. Our Rabbi Joshua said that the depth of the earth would take 60 years to walk through. There is one fountain close to Gehenna which receives and gives out hot waters that delight man. The rivulets ascend from the depths and water the face of the whole earth. And a spray went up from the earth to water the garden. The thick clouds pass on the sound of the watercourses to the seas, and the seas to the depths, and the depths to each other, and finally rise and give moisture to the clouds. As it is said, who causes the vapors to ascend at the end of the earth? All right. And so, now there is a portion, I believe it's actually in the previous passage, which describes the firmament joining in union. But the establishment of all of the, as far as the way that the water evaporates and then creates the clouds, and then the clouds rain down upon the earth in nourishing everything. That was established by the Most High, and that, you know, it was set into place to create the natural cycle, which creates the whole seasonal growth and harvest and the blooming, the increase, and then, you know, moving into fall, harvest, and then winter, the 3 months of rest. All of that is tied together with that. All right. And here's the part about the firmament. Okay. It says, and the wise will shine as the brightness of the firmament. And if the firmament had not been created, on the second day the whole world would have been drowned by the waters from above. But the firmament now separates the upper from the lower waters. These angels, which were created on the second day when sent by God, became winds. As it is said, he made his angels winds. When they minister before them, they become like fire. I have to skip down just a little bit. The divine presence of God. Okay, I believe this is the part. The divine presence of God sits in the center on a high and exalted throne, which is exceedingly majestic and is suspended above in the air. And the appearance of its glory is likened to a carbuncle. One half is as fire, and the other half is as snow. A resplendent crown of glory rests upon his head, and upon his forehead is written the ineffable name of God. His eyes overlook the whole earth. On his right is life, and on his left death. A scepter of fire is in his hand. A curtain is spread out before him, and the 7 angels which were created first minister before him within the curtain. His footstool is like fire and hell beneath the throne of glory. It has the appearance of sapphires. Fire plays round about it. Righteousness and justice are the supports of his throne. Clouds of glory surround it, and the wheel, the ophim, the cherub, and the holy creatures sing praises unto him. The throne is like a sapphire. It stands upon 4 legs, and 4 holy creatures are attached to it. On each side are 4 faces and 4 wings. When he speaks from the east, from between the 2 cherubim, he speaks in the direction of the face of man. When he speaks from the south, the direction is the face of the lion. From the west, the direction is the of the oxen. When from the north, in the direction the face of the eagle. He sits upon the throne high and exalted and looks round the earth, his chariot being upon wheels. Through the noise caused by the wheels of the chariot, lightnings and earthquakes are caused in the world. But when he traverses the heavens, he rides upon a swift cherub, as it is said, and he rode upon a swift cherub. When he hastens to do a thing, he flies upon the wings of the wind. And as it is said, he flew upon the wings of the wind. All right. So, you can tell by this description that the Most High is centered on the vaulted dome of the earth. And the reason why we see all of the heavenly hosts moving in circle around Polaris, as Ezekiel describes the eyes, the wheels within the wheels, which create the rim, which move in circle around Polaris. And as we see in the time-lapse photography, is because Polaris is representative of the Most High God. And just as the cherub, the ophim, and all of the other heavenly hosts, the seraphim, all are encircled around his throne. They, being the heavenly hosts, are representing the establishment of the celestial luminaries as they are all postured in humbled bow before the throne of the Most High God. And so that's why we see the stars moving in the manner and situated in placement in the manner that we witness through the time-lapse photography, which shows all of these celestial luminaries moving in circle around the throne of the Most High God, and that it is upon the vaulted dome that he is looking down upon us and watching over us, which, that it's just absolutely fascinating how all that comes to life when you have understanding, when you have discernment. All right. Because I know that already an hour has gone by, I'm going to go ahead and get into the premise and establish talking about this vortex at the polar north and how there is a gateway, as Jacob saw, that the angels are ascending and descending upon this ladder, that they are going up into the throne room of the Most High God, that the heavenly angels, which serve the Most High God, they meet with him above the Mount of the Congregation, because the Mount of the Congregation is also situated there in the sides of the north. And the reason this area is called the sides of the north is because all of the directions, south, west, and east, they all rise in apex and join together in the north. And so the place of the Mount of the Congregation, the reason it's called the sides of the north is because that is the center, the middle of the earthen plane, and that is also the area which the vaulted dome comes together in union, much like you see in a cathedral, with the dome at the center of the assembly, that it rises in union and joins together at apex, at the very height of the heights, the center of the vaulted dome as structure. And that is also where the Most High has established his heavenly throne. But we're going to be talking about specifically the Mount of the Congregation and this whirlpool, which leads down into the interior of the earth. Now, understand too that in my book, I describe and comment on all the things that I'm talking about here, but with so many more sources and so much more elaboration. But I'm just kind of trying to give you a quick breakdown for understanding this in conceptualization. So, because I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to tie it together with Odysseus, Jason and the Argonauts, and also Virgil's Aeneas when we come back in next hour. But I want to read a couple of side notes which you can find on Gerardus Mercator's azimuthal projection map, his 1569 azimuthal projection map. At the following coordinates, he has marked down these statements. At 80 degrees north and 220 degrees east, the ocean breaking through by 19 passages between these isles forms 4 arms of the sea, by which without cease it is carried northward, there being absorbed into the bowels of the earth. Yeah. All right, we'll pick it up on the other side, and then I'll get into this other stuff.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR, Truth Frequency Radio.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. And so let me read just a couple of things that I was reading from Mercator's map, and then I'll go ahead and get into the story of Odysseus, because it's absolutely fascinating. And I know that everybody has overlooked this description of this sea monster, and it will be absolutely fascinating because it completely ties into what I'm bringing forth with regard to this particular book and all the details on the structure of what is found as laid out by many different explorers and adventurers that are said to have successfully ventured towards that area and escaped certain death, and were able to return to relate their stories with the kings of England and the kings of Norway. And Gerard Mercator, who's one of the most famous cartographers from the 15th century, in putting together the Mercator map, which is the one that shows at the very North Pole this black lodestone magnetic rock called Rupus Negra, that it is this particular structure which is the tallest mountain in the world. And from there, that being the tallest mountain in the world, it is also said to have no vegetation growing upon it, and being magnetite, that it is smooth, and that there is no way that one can climb it because there's no foothold to be made upon it. And this is some of the stuff that will be cited in some of the things that we go into. And so at 80 degrees north, 220 degrees east, Mercator says the ocean breaking through by 19 passages between these isles forms 4 arms of the sea, by which without cease it is carried northward, there being absorbed into the bowels of the earth. The rock which is at the pole has a circumference of about 33 leagues. And so this rock is what I'm talking about as far as this magnetite, this lodestone mountain. At 72 degrees north, 170 degrees east, he says, from sure calculations, it is here that lies the magnetic pole, and the very perfect magnet which draws to itself all others, it being assumed that the prime meridian be where I have placed it. All right. He also says this for this particular place. A monstrous gulf in the sea, towards which from all sides the billows of the sea coming from remote parts converge and run together as though brought there by a conduit. Pouring into these mysterious abysses of nature, they are as though devoured thereby, and should it happen that a vessel pass there, it is seized and drawn away with such powerful violence of the waves that this hungry force immediately swallows it up, never to appear again. And so, remember I described that at the North Pole, there is this vortex which leads downward. And it is a whirlpool which is said to funnel the ocean's waters down into the abyss, the bottomless, into the pit of hell. And that this huge vortex, it not only swallows the waters of the ocean, it also every 6 hours reverses course and spews them out. And that in spewing them out, it creates the cycle, the tidal rhythm of high and low tide as it occurs twice daily, every 6 hours, reversing course. And so, now I'm going to go ahead and get into some of the description of this whirlpool. And then we'll read the stories of Odysseus. It says this, and this is a passage, an excerpt from my book, The Firmament, which I will be including some of this in this new book, but I will be elaborating upon it in great detail with a lot of these other stories. Okay, and so it says this. The 14th century writings Inventio Fortunata by Nicholas Delin and the Itinerarium of Jacobus Sinoian mention the magnetic mountain being so powerful that it pulled the nails right out of explorers' boats. The encircling whirlpool and 4 directional rivers surrounding the mountain were said to change every 6 hours, causing the tides, comparing them to the breath of God at the navel of the earth, inhaling and exhaling the great seas. The cartographer Gerardus Mercator's 16th century map below informs us that the waters of the oceans are carried northward to the pole through these rivers with great force, such that no wind could make a ship sail against the current. The waters then disappear into an enormous whirlpool beneath the mountain at the pole and are absorbed into the bowels of the earth. Fridtjof Nansen has found mentions of a great northern whirlpool in Norse legends of the world's well, Havelgamur, which causes the tides by pushing and pulling water through its subterranean channels. Isidore of Seville, the Gesta Hamburgensis Ecclesia Pontificum of Adam Bramensis, 11th century, the Topographia Hibernica of Giraldus Cambrensis, 1146 to 1220. His description of the northern whirlpool is cited by Mercator. The Historia Norvegia, circa 1180. The Speculum Regale, circa 1250, of Einar Gunnarsson, and a particularly interesting quote from the Langobard author Paulus Warnfried, 720 to 790, also called Diaconus. He says this, quote, "And not far from the shore which we before spoke of, on the west, where the ocean extends without bounds, is that very deep abyss of waters which we commonly call the ocean's navel. It is said twice a day to suck the waves into itself, and to spew them out again, as is proved to happen along all these coasts, where the waves rush in and go back again with fearful rapidity. By the whirlpool of which we have spoken, it is asserted that ships are often drawn in with such rapidity that they seem to resemble the flight of arrows through the air, and sometimes they are lost in the gulf with a very frightful destruction. Often, just as they are about to go under, they are brought back again by a sudden shock of the waves, and they are sent out again thence with the same rapidity with which they were drawn in." In Gesta Hamburgensis Ecclesia Pontificum states that Archbishop Adalbert told of a team of noble men of Frisia around 1035 to 1043 who set sail to the north beyond Greenland. As they headed north beyond Greenland, of a sudden, quote, "of a sudden they fell into that numbing ocean's dark mist, which could hardly be penetrated with the eyes, and behold, the current of the fluctuating ocean whirled back to its mysterious fountainhead, and with most furious impetuosity drew the unhappy sailors, who in their despair now thought only of death, on to chaos. This, they say, is the abysmal chasm, that deep in which report has it that all the backflow of the sea, which appears to decrease, is absorbed in turn, revisited, as the mounting fluctuation is usually described, as the partners were imploring the mercy of God to receive their souls. The backward thrust of the sea carried away some of their ships, but its forward ejection threw the rest far behind the others. Freed thus by the timely help of God from the instant peril they had before their eyes, they seconded the flood by rowing with all their might." And so it is with that we're going to go into the story from the Odyssey, which is absolutely fascinating, because you will see that it parallels in account what is described by these explorers as well as many others. And that the sea monster, which is referenced in Greek mythology as Charbrydis, that this particular creature is not a sea monster per se with regard to perhaps a giant octopus, as there have been so many stories of these huge octopus existing and being of such large and ginormous size that they are able to pull down the ships as they cross and sail across the oceans of the world. And that this has happened to many. There's even a modern story of a captain of a submarine that this happened to them and they could not understand what was going on. And when they looked, they found themselves to be in the arms of a creature, a sea monster, and but that they had survived and escaped and were able to pass along their tale. And so this same thing happens to Odysseus. So let me read a little bit about Charbrydis so that you can better understand before I read excerpts from Homer's story. The legend goes as this. Odysseus faced both Charybdis and Scylla while rowing through a narrow channel. He ordered his men to avoid Charybdis, thus forcing them to pass near Scylla, which resulted in the deaths of 6 of his men. Later, stranded on a raft, Odysseus was swept back through the strait and passed near Charybdis. His raft was sucked into her maw, but he survived by clinging to a fig tree growing on a rock over her lair. On the next outflow of water, when his raft was expelled, Odysseus recovered it and paddled away to safety. And so this is exactly what is described of those men from Phrygia that thought they were about to be sucked to certain death. And then the whirlpool, reversing course, expelled in geyser the waters of the deep and carried along with it their ships, allowing them to escape. And so we'll see this reflected in the story of Odysseus as well. But I'm going to first read the warning that Circe, the sorceress, that had seduced Odysseus and turned his men into swine, that she had given him advice on how to skirt around Charybdis. And she says this: Circe advises Odysseus on the dangers he will face on his voyage. On the other side are a pair of cliffs. One of them, with its jagged peak, reaches up to the spreading sky, wreathed in dark cloud that never parts. There is no clear sky above this peak, even in summer or harvest time, nor could any mortal man climb up it or get a foothold on it, not if he had 20 hands and feet. So smooth is the stone, as if it were burnished all over. Halfway up the cliff is a murky cave, the home of Scylla, facing northwest to Erebos. You will see the other cliff opposite Scylla lies lower, no more than an arrow's flight away. On this there grows a great leafy fig tree. Under it, awesome Charybdis sucks the dark water down. 3 times a day she belches it forth. 3 times in hideous fashion she swallows it down again. Pray not to be caught there when she swallows down. Poseidon himself could not save you from destruction then. No, keep closer to Scylla's cliff and row past that as quickly as may be. That's from the Odyssey, chapter 12, verses 84, I believe. And so 2 things I want to bring forth here. With regard to the Rupus Negra, the black lodestone magnetite mountain, which is also described by Enoch, and we might be able to get to that in the final segment. But here Circe is describing to him this huge jagged peak which reaches up to the spreading sky, and that it is so tremendously tall that it always has encompassed in its upper heights this dark cloud. And then she describes that no man can climb it because it is smooth, burnished all over, which is exactly what is described by Enoch and others when speaking about this lodestone mountain, that it's smooth and no vegetation grows upon it. Because again, it's magnetite. It's it's some form of some kind of metal type of mountain, and that it's magnetized and it draws as attraction all the compasses of the world. And interestingly, that the story of Odysseus, it describes the rate of the tidal flow, the rhythms, the inward and outward breath of the earth, in my opinion, which creates, propagates, is responsible for the causation of the tides. That here in this story, it is described as occurring 3 times daily, inward and outward. Whereas now the cycle, the tidal rhythm, is every 6 hours it changes flow, which, is 4 times daily instead of 6. And so it could be that the cycle had been sped up previously in the ancient past. All right, so I'm going to read just a couple of more verses, talking actually about Odysseus's encounter, his and his men's encounter with this particular whirlpool. So with much lamenting, we, Odysseus and his men, rode on into the strait. This side lay Scylla, that side in hideous fashion. Fiendish Charbrydis sucked the salt water in. When she spewed it forth, she seethed and swirled through all her depths like a cauldron set on a great fire, and overhead the spray fell down on the tops of the 2 rocks. But when she sucked the seawater in, one might look right down through the swirling eddy, while the rock roared hideously around her, and the sea floor came to view, dark and sandy. Ashy terror seized on the crew. We had looked her way with the fear of death upon us, and at that moment Scylla snatched up from inside my ship the 6 of my crew who were the strongest of arm and sturdiest. So again, Odysseus here describes being able to look deep down into the interior of this wide gaping hole, and that you could see even the seafloor dark and sandy at the bottom of this wide hole, which, is absolutely fascinating, because Job in chapter 26 describes exactly the same thing, which I am hoping that we will get to in the final segment. All right, continuing. After Odysseus's ship had left the island of Trinacia, Zeus sent a storm to wash it into the maw of Charbrydis. The raging west wind abated, but the south instead came at once to plague me, Odysseus, forcing me to retrace my track towards pitiless Charbrydis. All night I was carried backward thus, and then at sunrise I reached Scylla's rock and murderous Charbrydis. Just then she swallowed the salt water. I threw myself up to the lofty fig tree and clung close against it like a bat, because there was no firm foothold there, and no chance of climbing either. The roots were far below, and the big long branches hung out of reach overhead, overshadowing Charbrydis. I held on grimly till she should vomit out mast and keel again. That time seemed long to my anxious hopes, but about the hour when a judge in court will hear no more claims from brisk young plaintiffs, when he stands up and goes home to dine, about that hour the timbers swam up again from Charbrydis. I let myself drop, hands and feet together, and fell with a crash into mid-strait, just by the timbers, and then clambered onto them and rode with my hands. The father of gods and men, Zeus, would not allow Scylla to spy me, else I should never have escaped the precipice of destruction. All right. I'm going to read just a couple of verses to give you an idea that it was not just Odysseus or those other ancient explorers which had experienced and encountered Charbrydis, but it was also Jason and the Argonauts and also Aeneas. And I'll try to get this in quick. Hera commands the sea goddess Thetis assist the Argonauts in their passage between Scylla and Charybdis. I brought them, the Argonauts, safely through the wandering rocks, where fiery blasts rage and roar, and the rollers break in form on jagged rocks and reefs. But it still remains for them to pass the great cliff of Scylla and the gurgling whirlpool of Charybdis. Do not let my friends, the Argonauts, be so unwary as to fall into Charybdis, or at once gulp she will swallow them all. Nor let them go too near the hateful den of the Ausonian Scylla, the wicked monster born to Phorcys by nigh wandering Hecate, whom men call Kratis, or she may swoop down and take her pick and destroy them in her terrible jaws. What you must do is so to guide the ship that they escape disaster, if only by a hair's breadth. Apollonius Rhodius, Argonica. I'm going to skip, since I only got a short time, and read one from the Virgil. It says, the sea rushed violently in between them, dividing Italy for Sicily. All right, we'll pick it up on the other side. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. I'm pretty certain I'll be able to tie all this together, and then I'll be able to share a couple of scriptural supports for what I'm talking about. And so going back to Aeneas, he says the sea rushed violently in between them, dividing Italy for Sicily, severing their coasts and washing cities and fields on either side with a narrow strait. Scylla guards the right shore, insatiable Charybdis the left. 3 times a day the latter, down in the depths of a whirlpool, gulps whole tons of wave into her maw, and then spews them up again, flailing the heavens with spray. One final passage from the Aeneas. Aeneas recounts his voyage. Then we made out of Thrinacian Aetna on the horizon, and from afar we heard a thunder of waves throbbing on rocks, and inshore noises broke fitfully on our ears. The race was dancing with fury, the shoal water boiling with sand. And Nicias cried, "That must be the infamous Charbrydis. Those are the reefs, the terrible rocks that Helenus told of. Row for your lives, my comrades. Pull together, pull." Yarely they all obeyed my father's command. Palinurus turned away first to port, the bows of his vessel creaking. Then the whole convoy with oars and sails clawed off to port. We were tossed up high on an arching surge. Then down we went in the trough as the wave fell away, down to the very pit. Thrice roared aloud the reefs and the caverns of rocks beneath us. Thrice we beheld the sky through a spattering flounce of spindrift. Time passed, the wind went down with the sun. Utterly spent, not knowing where we were, we crept to the shores of the Cyclops. All right. That basically, sets the premise of what I wanted to bring forth with regard to Odysseus and how it ties together. Again, it's my opinion that Charbrydis is not a sea monster, but is in fact this vortex at the polar north, which sucks in the waters of the ocean and then spews them out, creating again the tidal rhythm of high and low tide. And, the whole premise that science tells us and affirms to us that it is the synchronous orbit of the moon as it moves in circle around the earth, which causes, because of its gravitational pull, causes the tides. And that where it moves in motion, that there the tides move in rhythm with it. Which again is, in my opinion, completely ludicrous, because if the moon's gravitational attraction is such that it can cause and pull the oceans of the world in such manner, why do we not see its influence on, for instance, butterflies or small birds or, anything else of similarity, balloons or anything like that? There's no influence upon all of these other things. And yet we are to believe that the moon is responsible for pulling the tides, which in some areas is very significant, multiple dozens of feet even, very extravagant in some places. All right, so we're going to finish this out with these passages from Job and also Enoch, where he describes this vortex and this gaping hole at the northern pole. Job says this: "Dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. Hell is naked before him, and destruction hath no covering. He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. He bindeth up the waters in his thick clouds, and the clouds is not rent under them. He holdeth back the face of his throne, and spreadeth his cloud upon it. He hath compassed the waters with bounds, until the day and night come to an end. The pillars of heaven tremble, and are astonished at his reproof." And so, again, you have this place at the north where there earth has no covering, and it is stretched out over nothing. And Job basically is describing this same thing, this whirlpool, this gaping maw into which the oceans of the world percolate. There's the other passage in Ecclesiastes where it's described as the spouts of the deep, which I cover also in my book. I'm going to read you the Targum rendition of this passage, just to give it to you from a different angle. It says this in the Targum. Is it possible that the mighty who are decayed will recover when they are below the waters and their camps? Sheol is revealed before him, and the grave and Abaddon have no cover. He it is who stretches the north upon the void. He erects the earth over the waters without anything to support it. Who binds up the rain in his clouds, and the cloud is not rent under it. He holds tightly the thick darkness about his throne, so that the angels will not see him. He spreads the clouds of his glory over it like a curtain. He decreed that the firmament should dwell upon the surface of the waters as the boundary between light and darkness. The pillars of the heaven tremble and are shaken by his wrath. Job chapter 26, verse 5 through 11 from the Aramaic Targum. Now, I'm going to read a description of this place as cited by Enoch. And I believe this is chapter 14 that I will be reading from. And this will kind of wrap up the show. It says this. I then surveyed the receptacles of all the winds, perceiving that they contributed to adorn the whole creation and to preserve the foundation of the earth. I surveyed the stone which supports the corners of the earth. It also beheld the four winds which bear up the earth and the firmament of heaven. And I beheld the winds occupying the exalted sky, arising in the midst of heaven and of earth, and constituting the pillars of heaven. I saw the winds which turn the sky, which cause the orb of the sun, and all the stars to set. And over the earth I saw the winds which support the clouds. I saw the path of the angels. I perceived at the extremity of the earth the firmament of heaven above it. Then I passed on towards the south, where burnt both by day and night 6 mountains formed of glorious stones, 3 towards the east and 3 towards the south. Those which were towards the east were of variegated stone, one of which was margarite, and another antimony. Those towards the south were of a red stone. The middle one reached to heaven like the throne of God, a throne composed of alabaster, the top of which was of sapphire. I saw too a blazing fire hanging over all the mountains. And there I saw a place on the other side of an extended territory where waters were collected. I likewise beheld terrestrial fountains deep in the fiery columns of heaven. And in the columns of heaven I beheld fires which descended without number, but neither on high nor into the deep. Over these fountains also I perceived a place which had neither the firmament of heaven above it, nor the solid ground underneath it. Neither was there water above it, nor anything on wing, but the spot was desolate. And there I beheld 7 stars, like gray blazing mountains, and like spirits entreating me. Then the angel said, "This place, until the consummation of heaven and earth, will be the prison of the stars and the hosts of heaven, the stars which roll over fire, and as those which transgress the commandment of God before their time arrived, for they came not in their proper season. Therefore was he offended with them and bound them until the period of the consummation of their crimes in the secret year." The book of Enoch, chapter 18, verses 1 through 16, from the Richard Lawrence translation. All right, a couple things I want to highlight from this. First, you notice that it speaks of the place where the earth and the firmament of heaven come together. And it also speaks of a place where there is no, at the extremity of the earth, where there is no firmament of heaven above it. In my opinion, again, that is the portal at the northern pole, which, if you have ever seen the primer fields, the experience of the 2 magnetic poles that show the toroidal field that is created, the electromagnetic universe that is established by the northern and southern, the polar opposites of the union of the spiritual and the carnal, with the centered upon the plane of the earth, which resides in the middle. That this is exactly what is being established, and that there is a northern vortex as well as a southern vortex, and that the structure, the cosmology of the enclosed world system reflects these vortex openings, one leading into the throne room of the Most High God, and the other leading down into the deep, into the abyss, into the bottomless, the pit of Sheol. And so, as strange as all this sounds, and as weird as these assertions are for those that are not yet well versed in the study of the biblical cosmology, this most certainly is what is being affirmed by Scripture, and that the magnetic mountain, the mount of the congregation, which lies at the center of the earthen plane, that it is this mountain which rises up to the throne room of God, as it says here in Enoch. But the middle one reached to heaven like the throne of God of alabaster, and the summit of the throne was of sapphire. This is the exact same thing that I read earlier from the Chronicles of Jeremiah. And, which basically describe him as sitting upon the vaulted dome, and that everything else surrounds him and circulates around him. I'll read that passage again. The divine presence of God sits in the center on a high and exalted throne, which is exceedingly majestic and is suspended above in the air, and the appearance of its glory is likened to a carbuncle. One half is as fire, and the other half is as snow. A resplendent crown of glory rests upon his head, and upon his forehead is written the ineffable name of God. His eyes overlook the whole earth. On his right is life, and on his left death. A scepter of fire in his hand. A curtain is spread out before him. I mean, that is just poetic in nature. I guess I can share just a couple other passages, because it says also, here, and the seven angels which were created first minister before him within the curtain. His footstool is like fire and hail, and beneath the throne of glory it has the appearance of sapphires. Earlier, Laurel had sent me a couple of passages which, we were talking about the throne of God and how the earth is his footstool. And so I'll share these two passages. Isaiah 66 verse 1, it says, "Thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that ye build unto me? And where is the place of my rest?" And so again, the whole thing. And the reason why, the firmament was put into place to separate the waters above from the waters below is because it is also separating as division, the place where God and the angels reside from that of our world and where we as humanity reside. That is the other aspect of the firmament. And it also imprisons into our world the rebel angels which were cast out on second day, and that were bound, restrained, and contained within this world by the impenetrable, invincible nature of the firmament. Acts chapter 7 verse 49. "Heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. What house will ye build me, saith the Lord? Or what is the place of my rest?" And so all of these things establish that indeed the Most High God is seated upon the vault of the dome, and that the directions of south, north, east, and west all rise in union above it, and they there form the firmament. I'm going to share one final passage, I believe, and then we'll end this in commentary. This is from the Legends of the Jews about the second day creation of the firmament. It says, "On the second day God brought forth four creations, the firmament, hell, fire, and the angels. The firmament is not the same as the heavens of the first day. It is the crystal stretched forth over the heads of the Hayat being the heavenly hosts, from which the heavens derive their light, as the earth derives its light from the sun. This firmament saves the earth from being engulfed by the waters of the heavens. It forms the partition between the waters above and the waters below. It was made to crystallize into the solid. It is by the heavenly fire which broke its bounds and condensed the surface of the firmament. Thus fire made a division between the celestial and the terrestrial at the time of creation, as it did at the revelation on Mount Sinai. The firmament is not more than 3 fingers thick. Nevertheless, it divides 2 such heavy bodies as the waters below, which are the foundations for the netherworld, and the waters above, which are the foundations for the seven heavens, the divine throne, and the abode of the angels. Now, interesting, there's one other passage which is very intriguing. And then we'll end in commentary. Oh, here it is. This is it. This is a fascinating passage. Again, it's referencing the north. It says, "To the north are the supplies of hellfire, of snow, hail, smoke, ice, darkness, and windstorms. And in that vicinity sojourn all sorts of devils, demons, and malign spirits." Remember, this is the interior. And it's also my opinion that this is where the locust army and the giants and the fallen angels are contained, and that they will be bound there until they are released from the north at the end of days. Their dwelling place is a great stretch of land. It would take 500 years to traverse it. Beyond lies hell. In the east, the west, and the south, heaven and earth touch each other. Now, isn't that, in my opinion, a complete description of the firmament joining in union with the earth, as I read from the book of the Secrets of Enoch earlier, and that the Lord God, Yahweh Elohim, describes joining in union the heaven and the earth in those directions, which create a circle, but notice that the north is not mentioned within this passage. Again, in the east, the west, and the south, heaven and earth touch each other, but the north God left unfinished, that any man who announces himself as a god might be set the task of supplying the deficiency and stand convicted as a pretender. Now, that is alluding to Isaiah chapter 14, again, where Lucifer says that he is going to exalt his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, and establishing his throne in the sides of the north above the mount of the congregation, that he would be like the Most High. And so all these things are tied together. There's so much, I mean, just really so much I could share that is connected to this topic, and which I will be bringing forth in this book. As I said, I have one more chapter to read, to write, and then thereafter I will be basically editing. And so I'm hoping that I will have time to not only complete this book, but also prepare a PowerPoint presentation for the upcoming debate. Don't forget, global versus flatearth.com. Get your tickets to the debate between Dr. Pigeon and I, August 5th and 6th, 2017, here in Duluth, Georgia. Hope to see you all there. Be blessed all. Good night.